All right, Greg, the name of the book is Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. Can you start off by telling us how you met Shasta, what got you interested in her story?
At the time, I was writing a book about the Sunshine Mine Fire, and it was called The Deep Dark. I was deep into my interviews, and I was going back and forth across the Panhandle, from here in Seattle area to through Coeur d'Alene and up to the mining district. And when it happened, when the kidnapping happened, and the billboards went up, and then when she was rescued, I just was like everybody else. I thought, wow, I'm so happy she's alive. I'm so sad about Dylan and her family, but it stuck with me forever. So 20 years later, or 15 years later, I wrote to Shasta and said, how come there was never a book about your story? Do you want to tell your story? And she had talked a little bit about working with another author that didn't go too well for her. But she thought about it and she said, you're the one to write it. And we started talking, and it's been that was like pre-pandemic. So lots of phone interviews and three or four face-to-face interviews at her home in Nampa.
Wow, that's quite a process. So you've really been working on it for 4 years, 4 or 5 years now?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm just like everybody that knows that story, how much it meant to all of us that she was rescued and that she was found. So much, that we had hoped was a happy ending. And then when you look at her life and you've seen her in the news over the years, you know that there was no happy ending right there.
Right. I read an account, I believe a news story, that when she first met with you, a several hour conversation. She was trying to maybe vet you or figure out if she wanted to go forward with the project.
I mean, she was really invested in telling the story. She just wanted to make sure that the story would be told with the complete truth, that I would do what other people wouldn't, which is even her family or the therapist, she felt, never really listened to her. And her idea was, that's part of the problem here. People want to help, they want to understand, but it's too terrible for them to actually hear what happened. And so I mean, the vetting was, would I be able to tell the full story? And I did.
Why do you think people weren't willing to listen? You would think anyone would be like, well, yeah, I'll hear her out. I want to hear her story. But what was it about it? Is it the length of time since it happened? Is it that it is so gruesome? What do you think the reasoning is for that?
It's the gruesome's a good word, but it is so painful for the listener when you hear what went on in the woods and before the kidnapping in her life, and certainly what happened after all of this. It's hard to hear. People don't want to hear it all. And even when I'm interviewing her and talking to her, there were things that I don't want to know, that I didn't ask about because even I, as much as I'd heard, I didn't want to hear it all. But she was very forthcoming. She was, she's not, shy about telling people what happened, but we're the problem. We don't listen. And that's the message, I think, really of the book is that we got to listen to these people because it helps them and it also helps you to understand.
What were some of the most difficult things to write about?
I think for me, as I worked through the book, what really struck me and what was the most painful was how long lasting trauma can be, that it could be a forever thing. And in my mind, I write a little bit about it at the end. I felt that maybe therapy and, you know, all the tools that are available to help people, maybe that was really going to cure all the hurt. And I realize now that it doesn't, that it doesn't go away. And that's the part that really sticks with me is that, we see people, Nate, on the news. They're on the news. We see these tragic crimes. We see the Idaho 4. We see whatever, but it doesn't go away. Now we go away as listeners or consumers of that kind of content, but those people will live with it for the rest of their lives. And that's not easy.
Right. I would imagine that in your interviews with Shasta, as you're compiling the book, that she told you things that have not been publicly revealed before.
Absolutely. She told, yeah, well, no holds barred. She told everything. And what was great about her at age 8 was she did interviews with the police, had the transcripts and all that. She is right on the money on what her recollections were. And her recall on detail was amazing. I mean, I think about myself at 8, like what could I remember? But of course, I didn't have something like that happen to me where, your parents are murdered in front of you, your brother's killed in front of you, a monster uh, does these unspeakable things to you. I mean, I haven't had that.
Mhm.
So I don't know what it's like to really, be have that kind of thing lodged in your memory, but she did. And she was an amazing 8-year-old, and she's an amazing 28-year-old.
I had just gotten into news when I was a brand new young reporter in Idaho Falls when this story happened. And so I, of course, am aware of a lot of the details, but it's amazing to me that a lot of people from here in Idaho, when you mention Shasta's name, they don't know who she is. Maybe because they've moved here or they weren't following the story at the time. Can you give just kind of a brief recap as far as her story, what happened, back in the early 2000s when she was abducted?
Right. It was in 2005, in Wolf Lodge, which is just outside of Coeur d'Alene. A man came into their home and killed her mother, her stepfather, and her teenage brother. And he took Shasta, who was age 8, and Dylan, age 9, and disappeared. No one knew where they were for about, 48 days is how long they were gone. When Shasta resurfaced, she resurfaced at a Denny's restaurant. A waitress there and other people recognized her because there was a huge search for both those kids. Where are Shasta and Dylan? We got to find them. Billboards everywhere. It was a big, big story. One of the biggest stories ever, I think. And to have her found at that Denny's restaurant was a big moment for all of us in the Pacific Northwest, and indeed everybody, like I think in the country. We just were so glad this little girl was found. What we didn't know was what had happened to her, fully what happened to her during those 48 days. We didn't know any of that. There were trials. I don't even mention the guy's name because here's the funny thing, Nate. When I do interviews or talk to people that have read the book, no one ever asks about him. And I think that's really interesting. No one ever says his name. They all want to know about her and how she's doing. So that's kind of remarkable. And I think that's sort of for the reader and for those who follow the story, I think that's the heart of the whole thing is we all love this little 8-year-old. We see the video of her in the Conoco in Kellogg when she's got the man with her. There's just a little kid standing there. And if you have a sister or if you have a child or a grandchild or whatever, you look at that kid and that pulls and tugs at your heart in a way that very few things do because she's standing there. She's scared. She's a captive and he's got her. And it's
Right.
something that is very tough to take.
Right. How did she, once she was found and the court proceedings happened with the suspect, the man that did this, uh, how did she at such a young age without a family? What happened to her then? A lot of people have wondered what has she been doing over all these years?
Right. I mean, she's been struggling. There's no doubt about it. I mean, at age, 12, she was sent off to one of those camps in Utah, rehabilitation teenage camps, a concentration camp, I think, for kids that parents can't handle, don't know what to do with. So she was there because she was doing a lot of things. She was doing drugs. She was acting out in other ways that, a manifestation of the trauma that could not be resolved was going on. So she had from age 8 to really age 16, 18, there were arrests, there were other problems in her life. She'd pop back into the news. We'd all see her. So all this outpouring of love and attention, in some cases morphed into, well, what's wrong with her? Well, why can't she get it together? She was saved. She was given a chance. And I think all of us just, you know, did not know what goes on behind all of the tragedy, and that's what the book's about.
Right. Name of the book again is Out of the Woods. Greg, one of the things that I believe that one of the things that impressed me about the book is you're kind of going beyond the headlines, beyond some of the clickbait stuff that we might see that attracts us all to it, to get to the substance of the matter. How did she deal with the media during all of this over the past 2 decades?
Right. The media is a friend and a foe for sure. You know that. I mean, the media is there when the good things happen, but they're really after the bad things. If she got arrested or, if her trailer burned down, There are things that where she would pop in and out of the news. She felt that after a time, people made assumptions about her. She was what she says, she did an essay for Oprah Daily, and it says, I don't want to be that girl. That girl everybody recognizes or knows in her community. I don't want to be the person that they feel sorry for. I want to be me. But it's hard for that to happen because of the lens we all have. We look at her and go, oh my God, look at all that stuff that happened to her. And she just wants to be a normal person.
Yeah. I remember April of 2023, I was covering a murder trial in Boise at the courthouse and waiting in line with a bunch of people from the public. We got inside and a lady comes up to me and she says, Shasta Groene's downstairs. And word starts to spread as if she's a celebrity. And she was there doing some routine stuff that you might do at a courthouse. It wasn't like she was in another courtroom or anything, but it was interesting to me that in these people's eyes, she's a celebrity or she's a famous person. And is she ever able to get past that? I mean, as much as she might not want it, how do you get past that?
Yeah. I mean, I think she's reconciled that, at least in Idaho, that's who she is.
Mhm.
What she does, what she's not, and she's not a professional victim. People have said, oh, she's victim here, victim that. She's not that. She is a girl that was 8, that had something awful happen to her, and she's trying to figure out how to be you or me. That's all she wants to be. But just like you say, in the courthouse, people whisper, they know who she is. When she goes to Walmart or wherever, there's going to people will whisper behind her back. She could hear them, that's Shasta. And that's a really tough thing to deal with. So the thing about the media and all of that is attention is a good thing, certainly when we are trying to do good. But these people that have gone through this sort of remarkable experience, that have lived to tell their story or be walk among us when they shouldn't, those people are wanting more than anything to be just like you,
Yeah,
a stranger.
right. Did she ever express any interest in talking with the man that did these horrible things to her and her family before he died?
Yeah, in her mind, yeah, in her, she talked about, in her a kind of a fantasy of going to confront him, and tell him, you don't own my life. You don't own, you're not my whole story. Uh, and I hate you, you know. Or alternately, she thinks maybe I should go see him and forgive him. All of that stuff. But thankfully, she never had to do that because I don't think that would have done anything for her. It would have only made him happy.
Mm. Yeah, good point. Gregg, you are well known for writing, best-selling books, and you've written several other books. How did you get into this genre? How did you decide, I want to write books, and how do you make them so successful?
Here's the deal on that. I wrote true crime because that's what I read as a young person. I would read Anne Rule, Jack Olsen, who's not related to me. I'd read those books, those narrative nonfiction books about people that were, caught up in something really bad. And I was interested in all that. That's what I wanted. I always tell people, like, if I was really into gardening, we'd be talking about my gardening book right now because it was what I liked. It was what I wanted to know about. And it wasn't about, I feel really lucky. I want to say this, Nate. I was lucky that I came in at a time when true crime was really big.
Mm.
It was huge, back in the 80s and 90s. Uh, Anne Rule and Jack Olsen, and Jack, wrote about your famous case out in Spokane, um, the serial rapist. And they wrote about the victims and the impact on the families. And other people weren't doing that. So I took a page out of that. I decided, well, if I'm going to write this in this genre, I want to write books that, yes, I want people to read them. I want them to buy them, but I want there to be some kind of value in what I'm doing. This is before, like you used the phrase, clickbait. This is before when we were thinking about likes, on Facebook or whatever. I wanted to do something because I wanted my life to be about something. And by telling their story, I feel like maybe I have done a little bit of good.
Why do you think people like reading about true crime and watching docuseries and movies and podcasts? What is it that draws us to it?
There are some people who, and I think it's a very small percentage of my readership, that just want to hear a gruesome, nasty story. I think that's a very small segment, and they get a lot of attention. The serial killer groupies, that kind of a thing. I think for my readers and people that consume a lot of the podcasts, they are mostly women, and they listen to them because they feel that whoever is doing whatever they're doing in that story, they can't understand it. They don't understand why someone would hurt a baby or kill a husband or shoot down the neighbor. They don't get that. And they just are digging in into their own minds to try to find out why. And that I think is what drives everybody to this kind of content, the why.
As you've done all these books and spoken with so many victims over the years, is there a common theme or characteristic that they all have?
That's a great question. This is the first book I have ever done where the person that I'm writing about, the main person, the victim, is alive.
Mm,
All of the other books that you read about, whether Idaho 4 or whatever, it's people talking about those people, saying, oh, she lit up the room when she came in and everybody wanted to be her, that kind of a content. People say, this is really somebody telling me her story and her story. And it's not a varnished uh, idea of who she was and who she is. It's her telling me the story. And that's what's different about this book. When you read this book, you're going to really get an insider's view of the impact of trauma to somebody who made it out.
interesting. Yeah. So, did you have to take kind of a different approach? Because instead of speaking with relatives and friends, you're speaking with the girl, the woman.
Right. I had a researcher. She helped me, Robin Lass, and she was great. We did a lot of legwork, but I thought to myself, this isn't a who done it. We already know who did it. This isn't a cop story. She was found by a random waitress, right? So the story in true crime usually follows one of those paths, way, or maybe the prosecutor. This is a story that I wanted her to tell. So while I do have all of the transcripts and we talked to some people about Shasta, it's really her perspective that the book is all about. And I think that's really interesting. It's something I don't think people have done or read before.
Yeah. Do you have any other projects down the line that you can tell us about?
I'm glad you asked because I have a book next spring called From the River's Edge, and it's about the Donna Perry case from Spokane.
And remind us about that one.
That's a transgender serial killer. Cold case that, 3 women were found murdered and their bodies left by the Spokane River. It went cold for a long, long time until DNA testing revealed that the person that had committed the crime was in a woman's prison in Texas, and she used to be a guy.
Mm. And that comes out in the
Oh,
spring.
yeah, so I'm back to Spokane. All roads lead back to you guys.
Right. Well, that's not bad. Maybe we can get you some positive news to write about. The other question I had for you is, do you foresee a future where Shasta maybe writes her own story, writes her own book, or was this kind of the close of a chapter of this part of her life where she's, this is my story, this is it, moving forward?
I think she does want to move forward, but that doesn't mean she doesn't want to, ignore her own story. I think what she would like to do more than anything is use what happened to her in some way to help other people. She's talked a lot about she wants to, do some sort of work for women who re-enter society after either trauma or prison or whatever. So there is in that 28-year-old this idea that maybe, telling her story in a comprehensive way will shine a light not only on trauma, but give her access and also in some way, we don't know what, to help other people. That's what she wants to do.
How do you decide which stories to go after, Greg? There's so many true crime stories. Like which is there something about certain ones that attract you?
Well, a lot of the whole thing is I want to write something no one's written about before.
Mm.
You know, I, to me, the very best story is a story that, is fully adjudicated. So there's no question about who did it or that someone's in prison or whatever. But what I'm really looking for is I want to bring something to my reader that is worth paying for. It's original content. It's not a rehash of, a trial that they've read about in the paper or online. So that's always for me. I'm always looking for that story that we really don't know much about.
Awesome. The name of the book is Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. It's available now. You can order it on Amazon or other bookstores. Gregg Olsen worked closely with Shasta on this story. Greg, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I mean, not really. I want to encourage people to give it a read. It's a tough, tough read. It is. but it's real. And I think that we're part of the problem if we can't take that in for our understanding about really what happens to people. You can say, oh, I was held captive in the woods by a madman for 48 days, but it's way more than that. The whole process of dealing with severe trauma, I want people to get in there and understand that maybe that person next to them, that's going through something, will always go through that. And we got to find a way to either love them, listen to them, and make sure that we understand that it's not over.
And help us understand what trauma is. I mean, many of us, we hear that phrase and we're like, well, what does that mean? And I would imagine as you get into this book, you see what it's like for her experiencing it, and we can say, oh, that's what trauma is.
That's exactly right. And trauma can be many things to other people. There's no doubt about that. But there is a thread there. The thread is our assumption that people always get better, that through therapy and whatever else we give them, that they're going to get better. But they will be able to function. Many of them can, but they haven't forgotten. And maybe sometimes, even years later, they want to bring it out again. And I think if you love somebody who's gone through something like this, I think it's our duty to hear them out again.